Okay, we're in Genesis chapter 49 this evening, and in this final section of the book of Genesis, which goes really from chapter 46 through to the end, what we've been looking at here is Jacob's move down from Canaan, he and his family moving down into Egypt, and Jacob being reunited there in Egypt with his son Joseph, and the settlement of Jacob and his family in Egypt in the land of Goshen. And so we have the final days of Jacob in the land of Egypt, and he was there for 17 years. We've learned that he went to Egypt when he was 130 years old, and he would die at the age of 147. So these final few chapters record those final years of Jacob in Egypt and his death. And then, as we'll get to next week in Genesis 50, will be the final chapter, which records for us the death of Joseph. So we're coming to the end here, and some of these stories are beginning to come to an end and wrap themselves up. So this evening we're in chapter 49, and in this chapter it's an interesting chapter. We have Jacob's final words to his sons, his final blessings upon them, and it's written in poetic form. So there's a lot of figurative language that is used in this chapter. We have various figures of speech, of similes and metaphors, and parallelism, which is a characteristic of Hebrew poetry, which we will notice in this chapter. So prior to his death, Jacob told his sons to gather together. Chapter 49, verses 1 and 2 introduces the chapter for us. Then Jacob called his sons and said, "Gather yourselves together, that I may tell you what shall befall you in days to come. Assemble and hear, O sons of Jacob, and hearken to Israel your father." He gathered his sons together so that he would tell them what shall befall you in days to come. So he exhorted them to listen to what he had to say. "Hearken to Israel your father," he says. So these were his dying words, and these words reflect his sons' characters, what they become in the future as the tribes of Israel. And there's a strong element of prophecy in Jacob's words here, which we see fulfilled in the later history of the tribes of Israel. And although this passage is often referred to as Jacob's blessing of his sons, his words also contain some curses upon some of them as well. There's an order here in which Jacob addresses his sons. The first sons to be addressed are the 6 sons of Leah. So these are in verses 1 to 15, and the first son is Reuben. So verses 3 and 4, Jacob has this to say of Reuben: "Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, and the first fruits of my strength, preeminent in pride and preeminent in power. Unstable as water, you shall not have preeminence, because you went up to your father's bed. Then you defiled it. You went up to my couch." Reuben is addressed here as Jacob's firstborn, and chronologically he was Jacob's firstborn son. And as the firstborn, Reuben was the first fruits of Jacob's strength. And in that position, he should have been preeminent in pride and preeminent in power. The firstborn was to receive a double portion as his inheritance, and Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 17 gives us that law. Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 17, which says, this is of a father who has 2 wives, and the firstborn is from the wife who is unloved, but he's not to lose that position because of that. And verse 17 says, "He shall acknowledge the firstborn, the son of the disliked, by giving him a double portion of all that he has, for he is the first issue of his strength. The right of the firstborn is his." So the firstborn was entitled to have that double portion of the inheritance, and that's what Reuben would have been entitled to as the firstborn. However, Jacob describes Reuben here as being unstable as water, which is an indication of his unstable character. And you think of that picture of water and how, if you're trying to carry water in a bowl, how it sloshes around and how it's unstable and it can flow here and there. So that's a description of Reuben's character as being unstable as water. And so Jacob says, then he shall not have the preeminence. And the reason for his loss of the privileges of the firstborn, Jacob explains, was because he went up to his father's bed and defiled it. And this is referring back to the incident when Reuben slept with Jacob's concubine, Bilhah. This was recorded back in Genesis chapter 35, verse 22, which says, while Israel dwelt in that land, Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard of it. Reference is also made to this incident in 1 Chronicles chapter 5 and verse 1, which is this genealogical table here. And chapter 5 deals with the sons of Reuben. The sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, for he was the firstborn, but because he polluted his father's couch, his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph, the son of Israel, so that he is not enrolled in the genealogy according to the birthright. So Reuben lost that position of being the firstborn because of his actions, and Jacob describes him there as being unstable as water. This is his instability. And later on in the history of Israel, the tribe of Reuben, the descendants of Reuben, were really an insignificant tribe within Israel. There's no leaders or great characters that emerge from the tribe of Reuben. We might want to read alongside this passage in Genesis chapter 49, a similar passage in Deuteronomy chapter 33. So if you have two Bibles handy, you might want to have one open at Deuteronomy chapter 33 as well, or at least keep a bookmark in there, because we'll be going back and forth to Deuteronomy 33. And Deuteronomy chapter 33 are the words of Moses, the blessing of Moses upon the tribes of Israel just before Moses' death. So concerning Reuben, Moses says this in Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 6. Just one verse here. May Reuben live and not die out, even though his numbers are few. An indication there of the tribe of Reuben being few in number in the time of Moses. We'll be going back to Deuteronomy 33 when we look at the other names here as well shortly. So that's Reuben, the first son mentioned. The second and third sons mentioned together are Simeon and Levi, now in Genesis 49, verses 5 to 7, which says, Simeon and Levi are brothers, weapons of violence are their swords. O my soul, come not into their counsel. O my spirit, be not joined to their company. For in their anger they slay men, and in their wantonness they hamstring oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Simeon and Levi are addressed together here as brothers, and in what seems to be a reference to the incident that occurred at Shechem, they are condemned for their use of violence. This was recorded back in Genesis chapter 34, verses 25 to 30, when this was after their sister Dinah had been raped, and Simeon and Levi went into Shechem and they killed all the people or the men in the city there. So Genesis 34 verse 25 says, on the third day when they were sore, this is when they'd played that trick on the people of Shechem and said that the men had to be circumcised for them to make an alliance or an agreement. On the third day when they were sore, two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and came upon the city unawares and killed all the males. So it goes on there to record their slaughter there in Shechem of those the males in there, and this seems to be what's being referred to here in chapter 49, that Simeon and Levi are brothers, weapons of violence are their swords. And addressing himself, his own soul and spirit, Jacob tells himself not to come into their council, not to join their company. So he's saying, telling himself not to have anything to do with the two of them. And their fierce anger and their cruel wrath are cursed there in verse 7, which led them to do the things that they did. So they're headstrong, violent men is how they're depicted here. And Jacob says that they shall be divided and scattered in the land of Israel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Jacob's words were fulfilled in that the tribe of Levi did not receive an allotment of land when the land was divided up by Joshua. They didn't receive any land as an inheritance. The tribe of Levi was the tribe from which the priests came, and the priests were given 48 Levitical cities, which were scattered throughout Israel, rather than being given a territory of land itself. Again, to go back to Deuteronomy and Moses' words, Deuteronomy chapter 33, verses 8 to 11, says of Levi here, and of Levi he said, give to Levi your Thummim and your Urim to your loyal one, whom you tested at Massa, with whom you contended at the waters of Meribah, who said of his father and mother, I regard them not. He ignored his kin, did not acknowledge his children, for they observed your word and kept your covenant. They teach Jacob your ordinances and Israel your law. They place incense before you and whole burnt offerings on your altar. Bless, O Lord, his substance and accept the work of his hands. Crush the loins of his adversaries, of those that hate him, so that they do not rise again. This is Moses' blessing upon Levi because of their faithful action on the time when the Israelites went and got involved in the worship of the golden calves, that Levi was the tribe who had stood on the side of God on that occasion, and they were blessed because of that, and they would have the role of being priests, and that's what Moses is referring to there. But back in Jacob's words, we see the violence that Levi had been involved in as well, and the consequence that they would be scattered, and that being fulfilled with the Levites there. The tribe of Simeon, the other brother mentioned here by Jacob, he refers to them being divided and scattered in Israel, and the tribe of Simeon did lose its identity, its distinct identity, as it was absorbed into Judah's territory. And Simeon is the only tribe that is not mentioned in Deuteronomy chapter 33. Joshua chapter 19, verse 1, refers to their land, which was really part of Judah's land. Joshua 19 verse 1 says the second lot, this is when the land is being divided up between the tribes and their territories being given to them. The second lot came out for Simeon, for the tribe of Simeon according to its families, and its inheritance was in the midst of the inheritance of the tribe of Judah. So their land was within the territory that had been allotted to Judah. Verse 9 of Joshua 19 says as well, the inheritance of the tribe of Simeon formed part of the territory of Judah, because the portion of the tribe of Judah was too large for them. The tribe of Simeon obtained an inheritance in the midst of their inheritance. And Simeon, a tribe of Simeon, then lost its identity as it was absorbed into that tribe of Judah. So these words of Jacob here, referring to Levi, Simeon and Levi, that they would be divided and scattered in Israel, were indeed fulfilled in the subsequent history. We then come on to Judah in verses 8 to 12, and this is a longer blessing pronounced upon Judah. Genesis 49 verses 8 to 12, Jacob says this regarding Judah. Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He stooped down, he couched as a lion and as a lioness. Who dares rouse him up? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he comes to whom it belongs. And to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. Binding his foal to the vine and his ass's colt to the choice vine, he washes his garments in wine and his vesture in the blood of grapes. His eyes shall be red with wine and his teeth white with milk. Jacob blessed Judah, saying that he would be praised by his brothers who would bow down before him. And the name Judah means praise. That was the name that Leah gave to him back in chapter 29, verse 35. It was an expression of her praise of God. We see here that he shall defeat his enemies, and he is likened to a lion and a lioness as well. Judah, Jacob says, shall possess the scepter, or the ruler's staff, which is the symbol of kingship and royal power. And Judah did become the tribe from which the royal family came. David was from the tribe of Judah. And of course, he was the second king following on from Saul. So Judah became the royal line from which the subsequent kings of Israel, David and then Solomon. And then after the kingdom divided, the kings who ruled Judah were from the family of David. And that this line would culminate in the coming of Jesus, the Christ, as king. The genealogy of Jesus that we're given in Matthew chapter 1 records his descent from David. He's Matthew chapter 1 verse 1. Matthew introduces his gospel, the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And Matthew traces that genealogy through Judah and David until finally coming to Jesus. And in Luke chapter 1 verses 32 and 33, when the angel Gabriel appeared to Mary to tell her of the forthcoming birth of her child, the angel said to her, he will be great. We'll be given the name Jesus. He will be great, and he will be called the Son of the Most High, and the Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there will be no end. So the fulfillment of Jacob's words concerning Judah here, that the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, is a prophecy of this royal line, which ultimately would lead to the coming of Jesus. In Revelation chapter 5 and verse 5, Jesus is referred to there as the Lion of the tribe of Judah. And as we've seen in Jacob's words, Jacob likened Judah to a lion or lioness. Revelation 5 verse 5 says, then one of the elders said to me, weep not, lo, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has conquered, so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals. Judah's prosperity is pictured here as he ties his foal to the vine and he washes his garments in wine. His eyes are red with wine, not from drunkenness, and his teeth are white with milk, which is a further picture of the abundance and the prosperity that he enjoys. Again, to read Moses' words in Deuteronomy 33, verse 7, just a shorter verse concerning Judah from Moses. This he said of Judah, O Lord, give heed to Judah and bring him to his people, strengthen his hands for him and be a help against his adversaries. The next two brothers mentioned now, sons, are Zebulun and Issachar in verses 13 to 15. which says, Jacob says, Zebulun shall dwell at the shore of the sea. He shall become a haven for ships, and his border shall be at Sidon. Issachar is a strong ass crouching between the sheepfolds. He saw that a resting place was good and that the land was pleasant. So he bowed his shoulder to bear and became a slave at forced labor. Here the birth order is reversed when the last two sons of Leah are addressed here. Issachar was born before Zebulun, but Zebulun is addressed first here in this order. And concerning Zebulun, Jacob says that he shall dwell by the seashore and would become a haven for ships, that his territory would border Sidon. Sidon was a seafaring port, a Phoenician port, which grew wealthy from sea trade. However, the actual territory that Zebulun was allotted was not on the coast, but it was a bit further inland. The saying may indicate that Zebulun would benefit from trade that came by sea, or would in some way be involved with work at sea as well. And Deuteronomy chapter 33, verses 18 and 19 is the passage that relates to this here, and mention of the sea here as well. And of Zebulun he said, rejoice, Zebulun, in your going out, and Issachar in your tents. They call peoples to the mountain. There they offer the right sacrifices, for they suck the affluence of the seas and the hidden treasures of the sand. It speaks there of them sucking the affluence of the sea, so getting rich through trade that came by sea, perhaps. Concerning Issachar, Jacob describes him as being a strong ass in verse 14. Issachar is a strong ass crouching between the sheepfolds. And he's characterized as working hard here, that he bowed his shoulder to bear and became a slave at forced labor. So it seems to have been a hard-working tribe of Issachar there. And then we come on to the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah in verses 16 to 21. And the sons here are the sons of Jacob's concubines, Bilhah, who was Rachel's maid, and Zilpah, who was Leah's maid. The sons of Bilhah are Dan and Naphtali, and they're addressed first and fourth in this order. And in between them, a second and third, are the sons of Zilpah, Gad and Asher. So Dan is addressed in verses 16 to 18, which says, Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a viper by the path, that bites the horse's heel so that his rider falls backward. I wait for thy salvation, O Lord. Dan would be a judge of his people, he says. And Samson was from the tribe of Dan, as we learn in Judges chapter 13. Dan here is likened to a serpent that bites the horse's heel so that the rider falls off. The Dan might be a small tribe, but he would perhaps use cunning tactics in order to defeat his enemies. Judges chapter 18 records one of the incidents concerning Dan when they had to go and find their own territory, when they were unable to occupy the territory that had been allotted to them by Joshua, and they had to go off and find territory to the north of Israel. Deuteronomy chapter 33 verse 22 is the reference there to Dan, and just one verse says, and of Dan he said, Dan is a lion's whelp that leaps forth from Bashan. So Moses likening Dan to that lion's whelp leaping forth, the figure of the lion used again there. In verse 18 of Genesis 49, Jacob offers a brief prayer of salvation to the Lord. He prays, I wait for thy salvation, O Lord. Not clear why that's inserted at this point, but that's his prayer of waiting for salvation. And then Gad, a brief word for Gad in verse 19, Jacob says, raiders shall raid Gad but he shall raid at their heels. So although Gad would suffer attacks by raiders, he would be able to pursue his attackers as well. Deuteronomy 33 verses 20 and 21 mentions Gad. A bit more said about Gad here. And of Gad he said, "Blessed be the enlargement of Gad. Gad lives like a lion. He tears at arm and scalp. He chose the best for himself, for there a commander's allotment was reserved. He came at the head of the people. He executed the justice of the Lord and his ordinances for Israel." And Gad, mention made of Gad, of how expert they were in warfare in First Chronicles chapter 5 and verse 18. First Chronicles 5 verse 18 speaks of the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh had valiant men who carried shield and sword and drew the bow, expert in war, 44,760 ready for service. So the Gadites included there, those valiant men ready for war. And in chapter 12, verse 8 of First Chronicles as well. From the Gadites, there went over to David, it's in time of David now, there went over to David at the stronghold in the wilderness, mighty and experienced warriors, expert with shield and spear, whose faces were like the faces of lions, and who were swift as gazelles upon the mountains. So there's an indication of their character there as well. And then we come to Asher, the next son in verse 20. Genesis 49 verse 20, again just a brief word concerning Asher. Asher's food shall be rich, and he shall yield royal dainties. So Asher would produce rich food fit for a king, and the territory that was allotted to the tribe of Asher included the fertile Jezreel Valley. So that may be a hint there at what they were able to produce. Deuteronomy 33 verse 24 says of them, and of Asher he said, "Most blessed of sons be Asher. May he be the favorite of his brothers, and may he dip his foot in oil. Your bars are iron and bronze, and as your days, so is your strength." The next one, brother, we have is verse 21 is Naphtali. Naphtali is likened here to a hind let loose. Verse 21 just briefly says, Naphtali is a hind let loose that bears comely forms. And again, Deuteronomy 33 verse 23 says of them, and of Naphtali he said, "O Naphtali, sate with favor, full of the blessing of the Lord, possess the west and the south." One of the judges, Barak, was from the tribe of Naphtali, who Deborah had called upon him at that time when Israel was invaded. That's in Judges chapter 4. The final group we have are the sons of Rachel, the two sons of Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin, and another longer blessing here for Joseph, as we might expect, verses 22 to 26, which says, "Joseph is a fruitful bough by a spring. His branches run over the wall. The archers fiercely attack him, shot at him and harassed him sorely, yet his bow remained unmoved. His arms were made agile by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob, by the name of the shepherd, the rock of Israel, by the God of your father who will help you, by God Almighty who will bless you with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that couches beneath, blessings of the breast and of the womb. The blessings of your father are mighty beyond the blessings of the eternal mountains, the bounties of the everlasting hills. May they be on the head of Joseph and on the brow of him who was separate from his brothers." Joseph is likened to this fruitful bough by a spring whose branches grow over the wall. And although he's attacked by archers, through the help of God, he would be able to resist. And we note several titles that are used of God here. He's described as the mighty one of Jacob, the shepherd, the rock of Israel, the God of your father, and God Almighty. So the most comprehensive blessings are pronounced here upon Joseph. Blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep beneath, blessings of the breasts and the womb, blessings of your father, which are beyond the blessings of the eternal mountains, the bounties of the everlasting hills. May they be on the head of Joseph and on the brow of him who was separate from his brothers. So this is an indication of the prominent position that Joseph would occupy in Israel through the tribes of Joseph's own two sons, of Ephraim and Manasseh. Deuteronomy chapter 33, verses 13 to 17, are Moses' words concerning Joseph. And of Joseph he said, blessed by the Lord be his land, with the choice gifts of heaven above and of the deep that lies beneath, with the choice fruits of the sun and the rich yield of the months, with the finest produce of the ancient mountains and the abundance of the everlasting hills, with the choice gifts of the earth and its fullness, and the favor of the one who dwells on Sinai. Let those come on the head of Joseph and on the brow of the prince among his brothers. A firstborn bull, majesty is his. His horns are the horns of a wild ox, with them he gores the peoples, driving them to the ends of the earth. Such are the myriads of Ephraim, such the thousands of Manasseh. So again, a similar blessing there from Moses on Joseph, and mention at the end there of Ephraim and Manasseh, the two tribes that came from Joseph. And Ephraim became prominent in the northern kingdom of Israel when the kingdom divided. Ephraim was that leading tribe, and it was from Ephraim that the first king of the north, King Jeroboam, he was from the tribe of Ephraim. And then finally we have Benjamin at the end here, and just one brief verse concerning Benjamin. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf, in the morning devouring the prey, and at even dividing the spoil. So Benjamin likened to this ravenous wolf, which devours its prey in the morning and divides its spoil in the evening. And the Benjaminites were skilled warriors. Benjamin was a warlike tribe. We see in First Chronicles chapter 8 and verse 40. First Chronicles 8 and verse 40 says, speaks of the sons of Ulam, that were men who were mighty warriors, bowmen, having many sons and grandsons, 150. All these were Benjaminites. So this is referring there to that list of names of those who were of the tribe of Benjamin. In First Chronicles chapter 12, verse 2 as well, we're told of them here. They were bowmen and could shoot arrows and sling stones with either the right or the left hand. They were Benjaminites, Saul's kinsmen. And a number of prominent people came from the tribe of Benjamin. Ehud, one of the early judges, Judges chapter 3, verse 15, was from the tribe of Benjamin. Saul, the first king of Israel, was from the tribe of Benjamin. His son Jonathan, renowned as a warrior, and the apostle Paul was from the tribe of Benjamin as well. The reference in Deuteronomy 33 is in verse 12 to Benjamin there. Of Benjamin he said, the beloved of the Lord rests in safety. The high God surrounds him all day long. The beloved rests between his shoulders. And Benjamin was the only tribe to remain loyal to Judah when the kingdom divided after the death of Solomon. So these are the blessings that Jacob pronounces upon his 12 sons. And as we've observed, there's a prophetic element to all of this, and an indication of what they would become later. The chapter concludes then with the account of the death of Jacob, verses 28 to 33, which says, "All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said to them as he blessed them, blessing each with the blessing suitable to him. Then he charged them and said to them, I am to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, to the east of Mamre, in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field from Ephron the Hittite to possess as a burying place. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife. And there I buried Leah. The field and the cave that is in it were purchased from the Hittites." When Jacob finished charging his sons, he drew up his feet into the bed and breathed his last and was gathered to his people. The blessings are summarized there in verse 28, that Israel blessed each of his sons with the blessing suitable to him. So they were blessed appropriately according to their characters. And with his death imminent, then Israel charged his sons with the task of burying him with his fathers. And he describes the location in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah. The location of the cave is specified in detail, as if giving them detailed directions on how to find it. He says it's to the east of Mamre in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field from Ephron the Hittite to possess as a burying place. And he also mentions others who are buried in that place, being Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, and Leah. And again, he identifying the field and the cave as being purchased from the Hittites. And the record of that was back in Genesis chapter 23, when Abraham made that purchase of that cave and that field for him to bury Sarah. So having charged his sons with these instructions concerning his own burial, verse 33 says that Jacob drew up his feet into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. So the moment of his death is recorded here with simplicity, but with feeling and emotion as well. According to chapter 47, verse 28, Jacob was 147 years old when he died. Death is referred to here as being gathered to one's own people, which implies the continuation of life after death, that when we die, that's not the end of things, or a reunion with those who have gone on before. And so the life of one of the great characters of the Bible comes to an end. The curtain comes down on Jacob's life here. Jacob, when he spoke to Pharaoh, had described his life, the days of his life, as being few and evil. And we think of the struggles that he went through and the troubles that he went through. But he was a great character, a man of great faith. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 21, makes reference to his faith and this time when he blessed his sons. Hebrews 11, verse 21 says, "By faith, Jacob, when dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph, bowing in worship over the head of his staff." So that's referring back to his blessing, as we looked last week, the blessing of his sons, Joseph's sons Ephraim and Manasseh. That's close to death. That's action of faith. And then back in verses 13 to 16 of Hebrews 11, summary really of the characters of that time, of Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Rebekah and Jacob and his family, the patriarchs really. These all died in faith, not having received what was promised, but having seen it and greeted it from afar, and having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. For people who speak thus make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. If they'd been thinking of that land from which they had gone out, they would have had opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city. So none of these characters, Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob, ever actually possessed the land that God had promised that would come later for their descendants. But they looked ahead with faith, and they looked ahead to that greater possession, that better country, that heavenly one, where God has prepared for them that city. Jesus in Matthew chapter 22 makes reference to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob when he's having a discussion with the Sadducees over the resurrection and their Sadducees' denial of the resurrection. And in verse 31, Jesus says to them, "As for the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was said to you by God? I am the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob." He is not God of the dead, but of the living. So that Jacob may have died physically, but his existence continued on after death, as did Abraham and Isaac, because God is not God of the dead, but he is God of the living. A couple of things we might want to think about from this chapter this evening. How do the blessings on Jacob's sons foreshadow the later history of Israel? What are those prophecies that we see in there? Can you identify those? And how would you assess the life and character of Jacob, thinking back over the past weeks in which we've studied the life of Jacob? What do you make of him? What do you think of his character? We'll stop there and invite any